Okay everyone, settle in because the story I'm about to tell you will absolutely wreck you emotionally. This is the kind of story that makes you believe in fate, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and child. So grab your tissues, get comfortable, and let me take you on a journey that starts in the darkest place but leads to the most beautiful reunion you could ever imagine. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago, and while most people are still hitting snooze on their alarms, 23-year-old Sophia Martinez is already on her feet, getting ready for another grueling day that would break most people's spirits. But here's the thing about Sophia, she's a fighter, even though life has thrown everything it possibly could at her. Sophia lives in what you could generously call a studio apartment, but honestly, it's more like a glorified closet with a hot plate and a dream. The walls are paper-thin, the radiator sounds like it's dying a slow, painful death, and there's a suspicious stain on the ceiling that she's learned not to think too hard about. The rent for this palace? $800 a month, which might as well be $8,000 given her financial situation. As she stands in front of her tiny bathroom mirror, Sophia catches sight of herself and sighs. She's beautiful, there's no denying that, with these striking green eyes that seem to hold secrets, thick dark hair that she usually keeps pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a face that would stop traffic if she ever had the time or energy to actually care about her appearance. But beauty doesn't pay bills, and bills are the only thing Sophia thinks about these days. Her morning routine is the same every single day, a cold shower because the hot water has been getting fixed for 3 months now, instant coffee that tastes like disappointment, and a piece of toast that she's grateful to have. Most people her age are worried about what to wear to brunch or which Netflix series to binge next. Sophia is calculating whether she can afford both lunch and dinner today, or if she'll have to choose. By 7 a.m., she's out the door and walking to her first job at Sunrise Cafe, a little coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a store that sells questionable electronics. The owner, Mrs. Chun, is sweet but can only afford to pay Sophia $12 an hour for 25 hours a week. Do the math. That's $300 a week before taxes. In a city like Chicago, that's barely enough to survive, let alone thrive. But Sophia doesn't complain, because complaining won't change anything. Instead, she puts on her apron, forces a smile, and greets every customer like they're the most important person in the world. She's learned that good service sometimes means better tips, and better tips might mean she can actually buy groceries this week instead of living on ramen noodles and hope. What Sophia doesn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, is that just 12 miles away, in a penthouse that costs more per month than most people make in a year, another person is also starting their day at 6 a.m. But this person's morning routine is slightly different. Where are you watching from? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's keep the love flowing at Agape Love Tales. Agape Love Tales is where romance comes alive, with stories of passion, secrets, and second chances that'll keep you hooked. Hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of hopeless romantics. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss a twist in our tales of love. Richard Blackwood wakes up in a bed that's bigger than Sophia's entire apartment, surrounded by luxury that most people only see in magazines. Egyptian cotton sheets, a view of Lake Michigan that real estate agents call priceless, and a bathroom that's basically a spa. At 58 years old, Richard has built an empire from nothing. Blackwood Industries is worth over $3 billion, with offices in 12 countries and 40,000 employees worldwide. But here's what's crazy about success: sometimes the more you have, the emptier you feel. And Richard Blackwood is the living embodiment of that contradiction. Every morning, Richard goes through the same ritual. He makes his coffee, not because he has to, but because it's one of the few normal things left in his life. He sits in his home office, surrounded by awards and accolades that should make him feel proud, and he stares at the same photo he's been staring at for 20 years. It's a picture of him with a woman and a little girl. The woman is Elena Martinez, not Martinez back then, but Elena Blackwood, his wife, his soulmate, his everything. She's laughing in the photo, her head thrown back, dark hair catching the sunlight. And there, sitting on Richard's shoulders, is 3-year-old Sophia. She's got Elena's eyes but Richard's stubborn chin, and she's grinning like she owns the world. That photo was taken at Navy Pier, just 6 months before everything fell apart. Just 6 months before Richard lost everything that actually mattered. You see, 20 years ago, Richard wasn't the polished billionaire he is today. He was hungry, ambitious, and absolutely obsessed with building his business. He worked 18-hour days, missed family dinners, forgot anniversaries, and convinced himself that all the sacrifice would be worth it when he could give his family everything they ever wanted. But Elena didn't want everything. She wanted him. She wanted a husband who came home for dinner, who remembered their daughter's favorite bedtime story, who didn't treat his family like another item on his endless to-do list. The fights started small. Elena would ask him to come to Sophia's dance recital, and he'd promise to try but end up stuck in a meeting. She'd plan a weekend getaway, and he'd cancel at the last minute because of some urgent business crisis. Each broken promise was like a small crack in their foundation, and eventually, even the strongest foundation will crumble. The last fight, the one that ended everything, happened on a rainy Thursday night in March. Richard had missed Sophia's third birthday party because he was in New York closing a deal. Elena had spent hours decorating, making cake from scratch, and explaining to a confused 3-year-old why Daddy wasn't there. When Richard finally walked through the door at 11 p.m., full of apologies and carrying an expensive toy as a peace offering, Elena had reached her breaking point. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just looked at him with these exhausted, defeated eyes and said the words that would haunt Richard forever. "You've already made your choice, Richard. You chose your business over us. So now I'm making mine." Richard thought she meant divorce. He thought they'd fight, get lawyers, split custody, and figure out how to co-parent. He never imagined that when he woke up the next morning, Elena and Sophia would be gone. Not just gone from the house, gone completely. No forwarding address, no note explaining where they went, no way to contact them. Elena had planned it perfectly. She'd been saving money from her part-time job, researching how to disappear, and waiting for the right moment. She changed their names, moved across the country, and made sure that Richard would never find them. In her mind, she was protecting Sophia from growing up with a father who would always put work first. Richard hired private investigators immediately. He spent millions trying to track them down. He followed every lead, chased every rumor, and never stopped looking. But Elena was smart, and when someone really wants to disappear, it's easier than you might think. Years passed. Richard's business exploded into the empire it is today, but success felt hollow without his family to share it with. He never remarried, never had other children, never stopped hoping that someday he'd find them. Every year on Sophia's birthday, he'd add money to a trust fund he'd set up for her, imagining the day he could finally give it to her. Meanwhile, Elena and Sophia, now going by Elena and Sophia Martinez, built a life on the West Coast. Elena worked as a waitress and house cleaner, sometimes holding 3 jobs just to make ends meet. She never told Sophia the truth about her father. Instead, she crafted a story about a man who didn't want them, who chose money over family, who was better off forgotten. Elena's plan was to give Sophia a simple but loving life, free from the complications of wealth and absent fathers. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and when Sophia was 16, Elena was diagnosed with cancer. The medical bills were astronomical, and even with insurance, they quickly found themselves drowning in debt. Elena fought for 2 years, but the cancer was aggressive, and their savings were depleted. On a cold December morning, just 2 days after Sophia's 18th birthday, Elena passed away, leaving her daughter completely alone in the world with nothing but debt, grief, and the belief that her father had never wanted her. Sophia dropped out of college. She'd been studying to be a teacher on a partial scholarship, and took on Elena's debts as her own. She worked multiple jobs, lived in progressively smaller apartments, and slowly paid off everything her mother's illness had cost them. It took her 5 years, but she did it, because that's the kind of person Sophia is. She honors her commitments, even when it breaks her. Now, at 23, Sophia is finally debt-free but completely broke. She's been living paycheck to paycheck for so long that she doesn't remember what financial security feels like. She works at the cafe in the mornings, teaches kids art classes at the community center in the afternoons, and does freelance graphic design at night. She's talented, smart, and hardworking, but in a system that seems designed to keep poor people poor, talent isn't always enough. Back in Chicago, Richard has never stopped searching. Technology has advanced, databases have expanded, and his team of investigators has grown more sophisticated. They've been running DNA analysis, cross-referencing databases, and following digital footprints with a kind of resources that only unlimited money can provide. 3 weeks ago, they finally got a hit. It started with a routine background check Sophia had submitted for her job at the community center. DNA collection has become standard for people working with children, and Sophia's sample ended up in a database that Richard's investigators have been monitoring for years. The match was 99.7% certain. This was his daughter. For the first time in 20 years, Richard knows where Sophia is. He knows she's alive, he knows she's in Chicago, just miles away from him, and he knows she's struggling. The private investigator's report painted a picture that broke Richard's heart. His brilliant, beautiful daughter working multiple jobs just to survive, living in poverty while he sits on billions. But knowing where she is and knowing what to do about it are two completely different things. Richard spent days just sitting in his car outside the cafe, watching Sophia work. She moves with purpose, treats every customer with kindness even when they're rude to her, and never lets her smile falter even though he can see the exhaustion in her eyes. She looks so much like Elena it takes his breath away, but she has his determination, his stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seems impossible. He wants to rush in, to scoop her up, to solve all her problems with a single check. He wants to give her the life she should have had, the opportunities she's been denied, the security she's never known. But he's also terrified. What if she hates him? What if she blames him for Elena leaving? What if she thinks he's just trying to buy her love? Richard has faced down corporate raiders, navigated hostile takeovers, and built a business empire, but the thought of approaching his own daughter paralyzes him with fear. This isn't a business deal he can negotiate or a problem he can solve with money and strategy. This is his heart walking around outside his body, and he has no idea how to protect it. So he watches, and he plans, and he tries to work up the courage to change both their lives forever. Meanwhile, Sophia has no idea that her entire world is about to shift. She's focused on survival, on making it through each day, on the small goals that keep her going. Today, she's hoping to make enough in tips to finally replace her work shoes that have a hole in the sole. Tomorrow, she'll worry about whether she can afford to renew her bus pass. But fate, as they say, has a sense of humor. And sometimes, when you least expect it, the universe decides to give you exactly what you've been needing all along, even if you didn't know you needed it. The stage is set. Father and daughter, both broken in their own ways, both longing for connection they don't even realize they're missing. Richard, surrounded by everything money can buy but empty where it matters most. Sophia, struggling with nothing but rich in the strength and character that adversity builds. Neither of them knows it yet, but their lives are about to collide in the most beautiful, complicated, heart-wrenching way possible. This is where our story really begins, with two people who share blood, history, and a love they don't even remember, standing on the precipice of a reunion 20 years in the making. And trust me, what happens next will change everything. It's been 3 weeks since Richard discovered where Sophia works, and every single day has been absolute torture for him. 3 weeks of sitting in his penthouse, staring at that photo, rehearsing conversations in his head, and chickening out at the last minute. 3 weeks of watching his daughter struggle while he has the power to change her entire life with a single conversation. But here's the thing about Richard, he didn't become a billionaire by being indecisive. Once he makes up his mind about something, he goes all in. And finally, on a Thursday morning that starts just like any other, Richard decides that today is the day. Today, he's going to meet his daughter. Now you might think Richard would just walk into the cafe, introduce himself, and hope for the best. But remember, this is a man who's spent his entire career analyzing risks, planning strategies, and never making a move without considering every possible outcome. So of course, Richard has a plan. His plan is actually kind of sweet in a completely overthinking typical rich guy way. Instead of shocking Sophia with the truth right away, Richard decides he's going to become a regular customer first. He's going to ease into her life, let her get comfortable with him, maybe build a little rapport before dropping the biggest bombshell of her life. It's 8 a.m. when Richard first walks into Sunrise Cafe, and honestly, he's more nervous than he's ever been in his life. This is a man who's given presentations to Fortune 500 CEOs, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and testified before Congress, but the thought of ordering coffee from his own daughter has him sweating through his $1,000 suit. Sophia is behind the counter, focused on the morning rush, completely unaware that her entire life is about to change. She looks up when she hears the door chime, and for a split second, just a split second, there's this moment of recognition that neither of them quite understands. It's like looking in a mirror across time, seeing your own features reflected in a stranger's face. Richard orders a simple black coffee, nothing fancy, and when Sophia hands it to him, their fingers brush for just a moment. Both of them feel it, this weird, inexplicable connection, but neither knows what to make of it. Sophia thinks he seems familiar somehow, but she can't place him. Richard is trying not to stare, trying not to cry, trying not to grab her and never let go. He pays with cash and leaves a $20 tip on a $3 coffee, which immediately catches Sophia's attention because, let's be honest, nobody tips $20 for coffee unless they're either very drunk or very generous, and it's 8 a.m. so drunk is probably off the table. Sophia calls out a thank you as Richard leaves, and when he turns back to smile at her, she notices something that will stick with her for the rest of the day. He has sad eyes. Really deeply sad eyes, like someone carrying around pain that's too heavy for one person to bear. The next morning, Richard comes back. Same time, same order, same enormous tip. And the morning after that, and the morning after that. By the end of the first week, Sophia starts looking forward to seeing the sad-eyed man with the generous tips. She even starts having his coffee ready when she sees him coming down the street. They start talking, just small talk at first. Richard asks how her day is going. Sophia mentions the weather, typical customer-server conversation. But gradually, it becomes more. Richard is careful not to ask too many personal questions, but he's desperate to know everything about her life. Sophia finds herself looking forward to these brief conversations because, unlike most of her customers, this man actually listens when she talks. Richard learns that Sophia is an artist. She mentions doing freelance graphic design and teaching art classes. His heart nearly breaks when she casually mentions that she'd love to go back to school someday, but can't afford it right now. He discovers that she's funny, intelligent, and has this incredible strength that she doesn't even seem to recognize in herself. Sophia learns that her mysterious customer, she doesn't even know his name yet, seems lonely despite his expensive clothes and generous tips. She notices that he never mentions family, never talks about weekend plans, and always sits alone at the corner table for exactly 15 minutes before leaving. 2 weeks into this routine, something shifts. Richard is getting braver, asking slightly more personal questions, and Sophia is opening up more. She mentions that she never knew her father, that it's just been her and her mom until her mom passed away 5 years ago. When she says this, Richard has to excuse himself and step outside because the emotion hits him like a truck. Elena is dead. His Elena, the love of his life, died 5 years ago, and he never even knew. Sophia has been completely alone in the world for 5 years, struggling and fighting and surviving without any family at all. The guilt nearly destroys him right there on the sidewalk. But Richard pulls himself together and goes back inside, because Sophia is waiting, and he can see in her eyes that she's worried she said something wrong. He reassures her that she didn't, orders another coffee he doesn't want, and leaves an even bigger tip than usual. That night, Richard can't sleep. He paces his penthouse, staring out at the city lights, thinking about Elena, thinking about Sophia, thinking about all the years they lost. He realizes that his careful plan to ease into her life is actually selfish. Every day he waits is another day Sophia struggles unnecessarily. Every day he waits is another day he loses with his daughter. The next morning, Richard walks into the cafe with a different energy. Sophia notices immediately. He seems more determined, more focused, like someone who's made a difficult decision. When she hands him his coffee, instead of taking his usual seat, Richard stays at the counter. And then he says the words that change everything. "Sophia, I need to tell you something. My name is Richard Blackwood, and I think I'm your father." The coffee cup slips from Sophia's hand and shatters on the floor behind the counter. She stares at Richard like he's just told her he's from another planet. Other customers are looking over, wondering what's happening, but Sophia can't move, can't speak, can't even breathe properly. Richard pulls out his phone and shows her the photo, the one he's been staring at for 20 years. There's Elena, young and laughing, and there's little Sophia on his shoulders. Sophia's hands are shaking as she looks at the picture, because she has the exact same photo in a box under her bed. Her mother gave it to her before she died, saying it was the only picture she had of Sophia's father. "This isn't possible," Sophia finally whispers, but even as she says it, she's seeing the resemblance. The eyes, the chin, the stubborn set of the jaw when concentrating, it's all there. "My father. My mother said he didn't want us. She said he chose his business over his family." Richard's heart breaks all over again, because he realizes what Elena did. She didn't just take Sophia away, she made sure Sophia would never want to find him. "Sophia, I searched for you every single day for 20 years. I never stopped looking. I never stopped wanting you." Mrs. Chun, the cafe owner, notices the commotion and comes over. Sophia is crying now, confused and overwhelmed, and Richard looks like he might pass out from stress. Mrs. Chun, being the wise woman she is, tells them they need to take this conversation somewhere private, and she'll handle the cafe. So Richard and Sophia find themselves sitting in his car, this ridiculously expensive Bentley that costs more than Sophia makes in 5 years, and the contrast between their worlds has never been more obvious. Sophia is wearing her second-hand work clothes and shoes with holes in them, sitting in a car that smells like leather and success, across from a man who might be her father and who clearly has more money than she can even comprehend. Richard starts explaining everything: the fights with Elena, the morning he woke up to find them gone, the private investigators, the endless searching. He shows Sophia the files his team has compiled: 20 years of leads, dead ends, false hopes, and never giving up. He shows her the trust fund he's been adding to every year on her birthday, now worth over $2 million. But instead of being happy about this revelation, Sophia gets angry. Really, really angry. So you're telling me that while I've been working 3 jobs just to survive, while I couldn't afford to go to my mother's funeral the way she deserved, while I've been living in apartments with broken heat and eating ramen for dinner every night, you've been sitting on millions of dollars that supposedly belong to me? Richard tries to explain that he didn't know where she was, that the money was always meant for her, but Sophia is past listening to explanations. 23 years of struggle, of believing her father didn't want her, of watching her mother work herself to death, and now this stranger in his fancy car is telling her it was all unnecessary? You want to know what I think? Sophia says, and her voice is shaking with rage. I think you feel guilty. I think your conscience finally got to you, and now you want to throw money at me to make yourself feel better about abandoning us. Richard is devastated. This is his worst nightmare coming true. Sophia, please, I never abandoned you. I was building a business so I could provide for you and your mother. I was working so hard because I wanted to give you everything. Everything except a father, Sophia shoots back. Do you know what I would have traded for one bedtime story? For one dance recital where my dad was in the audience? For one birthday where I didn't have to pretend I wasn't wondering why my father didn't love me enough to stay. The pain in her voice is unbearable, and Richard realizes that no amount of money, no amount of explanation, can undo the damage that's been done. Sophia has lived her entire life believing she wasn't wanted, and now he's asking her to rewrite that story in a single conversation. Richard tries a different approach. He starts talking about Elena, sharing memories that only someone who truly loved her would know. He tells Sophia about Elena's terrible cooking, but how she insisted on making birthday cakes from scratch anyway. He tells her about Elena's habit of humming old songs while she cleaned, about how she always left little love notes in his briefcase, about the way she used to dance around the kitchen in her socks. This hits Sophia differently, because these are things about her mother that she remembers too. Her mother did hum while cleaning. She did make terrible cakes with too much love and not enough skill. She did dance in her socks when she thought Sophia wasn't watching. She never told you any of this, did she? Richard asks gently. She erased me completely from your story. Sophia's anger starts to crack, replaced by confusion and grief. She said you didn't want children. She said you were married to your work. She said. Sophia pauses, remembering. She said you told her that we were holding you back. Richard closes his eyes, and when he opens them, they're full of tears. I never said that. I never even thought it. You and your mother were everything to me. I was so young and stupid, and I thought providing meant working all the time. I thought if I could just build something big enough, successful enough, then I could give you both the world. But we didn't want the world, Sophia whispers. We just wanted you. They sit in silence for a long moment, both crying, both trying to process 20 years of lies and misunderstanding. Finally, Richard speaks again. I know you don't believe me. I know this is too much, too fast. But Sophia, you have to understand, finding you is the best thing that's happened to me in 20 years. I don't want to buy your love. I don't want to fix your problems with money. I just want the chance to be your father. But Sophia has had enough. The emotional overload is too much, the revelations too overwhelming. She opens the car door and starts to get out. I can't do this. I can't process this. I need time to think. Richard panics. Please don't disappear again. Please don't leave like your mother did. I can't lose you twice. I'm not my mother, Sophia says firmly. But I'm also not ready for this. I don't know how to have a billionaire father. I don't know how to trust that you won't disappear when things get complicated. And honestly, I don't know if I can forgive you for not trying harder to find us." She walks away, leaving Richard sitting in his expensive car, wondering if he's just lost his daughter for the second time in his life. The next few days are torture for both of them. Richard doesn't go to the cafe, he doesn't want to pressure Sophia, but he can't focus on work, can't eat, can't sleep. He's terrified that she'll disappear again, that he's blown his only chance at having a relationship with his daughter. Meanwhile, Sophia is going through every emotion possible. She's angry at Richard for not finding them sooner. She's angry at Elena for lying to her. She's angry at herself for not knowing her father was alive and looking for her. But underneath all that anger is something else, hope. For the first time in 5 years, she's not completely alone in the world. Sophia digs out the box of her mother's things and finds that photo Richard showed her. She studies it for hours, looking at the way her father is holding her, the genuine smile on his face, the way he's looking at her like she's the most precious thing in the world. This doesn't look like a man who didn't want his daughter. She also finds Elena's journal from that time period, which she'd never been able to bring herself to read before. The entries are heartbreaking, Elena writing about feeling invisible, about Richard missing important moments, about feeling like she was raising Sophia alone even though she was married. But there are other entries too, ones where Elena writes about Richard staying up all night when baby Sophia was sick, about him reading parenting books and trying to learn how to braid hair, about the way he'd call home 3 times a day just to hear Sophia babble over the phone. The picture Elena painted of Richard, the absent, uncaring father, doesn't match the man in these journal entries. This man loved his daughter desperately but didn't know how to balance work and family. This man wasn't a villain. He was just young and misguided and trying to do right by his family in the wrong way. A week after their confrontation, Sophia is at work when she gets a call that changes everything. It's her landlord, and he's not calling with good news. The building has been sold, and all tenants have 30 days to vacate. With her current income, finding a new apartment she can afford is basically impossible. That same day, she gets another call. The community center where she teaches art classes is losing its funding and has to let her go. In the span of 2 phone calls, Sophia loses both her housing and 1/3 of her income. She sits in her tiny apartment that night, surrounded by boxes she can't afford to move, looking at eviction papers and job rejection emails, and for the first time in years, she breaks down completely. She's tired of being strong. She's tired of struggling. She's tired of pretending that she can handle everything on her own. And in that moment of complete desperation, she thinks about Richard. About his offer to help, about the trust fund, about the fact that for the first time in her life, she doesn't have to face a crisis alone. But Sophia's pride is fierce, and the idea of asking her estranged father for money feels like admitting defeat. She'd rather sleep in her car than give him the satisfaction of being right about her needing him. Meanwhile, Richard has been keeping tabs on Sophia through his private investigator, not to invade her privacy, but because he's terrified she'll disappear again. So when the investigator reports about Sophia's eviction notice and job loss, Richard's heart breaks all over again. This is exactly what he was afraid of. His daughter is struggling, and he has the power to help her, but she's too proud and too hurt to accept anything from him. It's like watching someone you love drowning while they refuse to grab the life preserver you're throwing them. Richard knows that showing up with money or solutions will only make Sophia more angry. But he also knows that he can't just sit in his penthouse while his daughter faces homelessness. So he does something that surprises even himself. He shows up at her apartment, not with a checkbook or a business proposal, but with a willingness to just be present. When Sophia opens her door and sees Richard standing there, she's so emotionally exhausted that she doesn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. He's holding 2 cups of coffee from her cafe and looking as lost as she feels. "I heard about your apartment," he says simply. "I didn't come here to fix anything or offer you money. I just came here to ask if you want company while you pack." And that right there is exactly what Sophia needs to hear. Not that he'll solve her problems, not that money can make everything better, but just that she doesn't have to face this alone. For the first time since their confrontation, Sophia lets him in. Richard walks into Sophia's apartment and his heart immediately breaks for the 3rd time in a week. Not because it's small or shabby, he's not a snob about that kind of thing, but because he can see exactly how hard his daughter has been fighting just to survive. Everything in the apartment is clean but worn, carefully maintained but clearly secondhand. There are art supplies organized in makeshift storage containers, textbooks she probably can't afford to replace, and a single photograph on the windowsill, the same photo he's been staring at for 20 years. Sophia offers him coffee, which is kind of hilarious because it's the most awkward host-guest situation imaginable. Here's this billionaire sitting on her hand-me-down couch, trying to figure out how to help pack boxes without insulting her pride, while she's making instant coffee with water heated in a microwave because her stove doesn't work properly. But you know what's amazing about this moment? Neither of them cares about the awkwardness. For the first time in a week, Sophia isn't angry, and Richard isn't terrified of saying the wrong thing. They're just two people sharing coffee and trying to figure out how to talk to each other. Richard starts by asking about her art. Not her situation, not her problems, but her passion. He notices the graphic design work scattered across her tiny desk, freelance projects she's been working on to make ends meet. And guys, Sophia is incredibly talented. Like, seriously gifted. Her work is creative, professional, and absolutely stunning. These are amazing, Richard tells her, and he means it. You have real talent, Sophia. And for the first time since she found out who he is, Sophia smiles at her father. Not a big smile, not a completely trusting smile, but a real one. Because compliments about her work mean more to her than compliments about anything else. Her art is the one thing in her life that's purely hers, that no one can take away from her. They spend the next hour just talking while they pack. Not about the past, not about money, not about all the heavy stuff they need to work through eventually. Just normal conversation, Richard asking about her favorite artists, Sophia telling him about the kid she teaches, both of them discovering that they have more in common than either expected. Turns out they both love old movies, the kind with fast-talking dialogue and glamorous stars. They both read voraciously, though Richard's reading tends toward business biographies while Sophia prefers literary fiction. They both have this habit of organizing things in very specific ways, and they both drink their coffee black, which makes them both laugh when they realize it. I get that from you, I guess, Sophia says, holding up her coffee mug, and it's the first time she's acknowledged any connection between them without anger or pain. As they pack, Richard learns more about Sophia's life over the past 5 years. How she paid off all of Elena's medical debt, even though she legally didn't have to. How she's been sending small donations to the hospital's cancer research fund every month, even when she could barely afford groceries. How she volunteers at a literacy program on weekends, teaching adults how to read. With every story Sophia tells, Richard becomes more amazed by his daughter's character. She's not just strong, she's genuinely good. Despite everything she's been through, despite all the reasons she has to be bitter or selfish, Sophia has somehow maintained this incredible compassion for other people. Your mother raised an extraordinary woman, Richard tells her, and Sophia has to turn away because she starts crying again. I miss her so much, Sophia admits. I keep thinking about what she'd say if she knew about you. If she'd be angry that I let you help, or if she'd understand why I need to. Richard's quiet for a long moment before he answers. I think she'd want you to be happy. And I think deep down, she'd want us to find our way back to each other. They talk about Elena as they pack, not about the painful parts, but about the good memories. Richard shares stories about Elena that Sophia never heard, about the woman she was before everything fell apart. Sophia shares memories of her mother's strength, her humor, her fierce protectiveness of her daughter. And slowly, piece by piece, they start building a more complete picture of what happened 20 years ago. Not the villain story Elena told Sophia, and not the victim story Richard told himself, but the truth, two people who loved each other and their daughter but didn't know how to make it work. By the time they finish packing, it's dark outside, and Sophia realizes she has no idea what comes next. She has 30 days to find a new place to live, but with her reduced income, the math just doesn't work. She's been trying not to think about it, but the reality is starting to sink in. Richard sees her anxiety building and makes a suggestion that surprises both of them. What if you stayed with me? Just temporarily, while you figure out what you want to do next. Sophia's first instinct is to say no. Living with her billionaire father in his probably ridiculous penthouse feels like giving up, like admitting she can't take care of herself. But then she thinks about her alternatives, sleeping in her car, imposing on friends who can barely afford their own rent, accepting that she might end up homeless despite working 3 jobs. I'd pay rent, she says finally. And I'd only stay until I found something I could afford on my own. Richard wants to tell her that rent isn't necessary, that he has more space than he knows what to do with, that he'd pay her to stay just to have his daughter close. But he's learning that Sophia needs to maintain her independence, her sense of earning her own way. So he just nods and suggests they figure out the details later. Moving day is awkward but sweet. Sophia's entire life fits into the back of a pickup truck Richard rents for the occasion. He insists on helping carry boxes, even though his idea of manual labor usually involves signing documents, and Sophia finds herself laughing at his complete inability to efficiently pack a truck. You know, for a billionaire business genius, you're really bad at spatial reasoning, she teases, and Richard grins because it's the first time she's joked with him like he's actually her dad. When they get to Richard's penthouse, Sophia's overwhelming reaction isn't awe or envy, it's sadness. The place is gorgeous, obviously, with floor-to-ceiling windows and designer everything, but it feels like a museum. There's no personality, no warmth, no signs that anyone actually lives there. It's the home of a man who's been lonely for a very long time. Richard shows Sophia to her room, which is bigger than her entire apartment was, and she tries to hide her shock at the luxury. But what gets to her isn't the expensive furniture or the amazing view. It's the fact that Richard has clearly prepared for her arrival. There's a desk set up for her art supplies, a bookshelf with some of the novels she mentioned liking, and a small coffee maker because he remembered she drinks a lot of coffee while working. You didn't have to do all this, Sophia says, and her voice is a little shaky. I wanted to, Richard replies simply. I've been waiting 20 years to take care of you. Let me start somewhere. The first few weeks of living together are like the world's most careful dance. Both of them are trying so hard not to step on each other's boundaries that they barely interact beyond polite good mornings and how was your day conversations. Richard leaves for work early and comes home late, not because he's avoiding Sophia, but because he doesn't want her to feel like he's hovering or pressuring her to spend time with him. Sophia keeps to her room most of the time, working on freelance projects and job applications, not because she doesn't want to get to know Richard, but because she's still processing everything and doesn't want to feel like she owes him conversation along with rent. But slowly, gradually, they start finding their rhythm. It starts with breakfast. Sophia's always been an early riser, years of multiple jobs will do that to you, and she discovers that Richard is too. So they start having coffee together in the mornings, not saying much at first, but just being comfortable in each other's presence. Then Richard mentions that he never learned to cook properly. Being rich means you can always order in or eat at restaurants, and Sophia offers to teach him some basic meals. She's not a gourmet cook, but years of living on a tight budget taught her how to make simple, inexpensive food taste good. Their first cooking lesson is a disaster in the most endearing way possible. Richard burns the onions, uses salt instead of sugar, and somehow manages to set off the smoke alarm making scrambled eggs. But they're both laughing by the end of it, and when they finally sit down to eat their slightly burnt, definitely imperfect dinner, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. This is nice, Sophia says, and she means it. I haven't had someone to cook for in a long time. I haven't had someone cook for me since. Richard pauses, realizing what he was about to say. Since my mom, Sophia finishes, and instead of being painful, it feels like acknowledgement of their shared history. As the weeks pass, they develop more routines. Richard starts coming home earlier, not because he has less work, but because he wants to spend time with Sophia. They watch old movies together, the ones they both love, and Richard discovers that Sophia has this amazing laugh, the kind that's completely infectious. Sophia starts joining Richard for dinner instead of eating alone in her room. She tells him about her day, her freelance clients, the adult literacy program where she volunteers. Richard tells her about his business, but more than that, he tells her about the parts of his life that aren't about money, the book he's reading, the documentary he watched, his thoughts about art and politics and philosophy. They're getting to know each other as people, not just as father and daughter, and they're both surprised by how much they genuinely like each other. One evening, about a month after Sophia moved in, she's working late on a particularly challenging design project when Richard knocks on her door. He's holding 2 cups of tea and looking uncharacteristically nervous. I have something for you, he says, but I want you to know there are no strings attached. You don't owe me anything for this, and you can say no if it makes you uncomfortable. Sophia looks up from her computer, curious and a little wary. Richard hands her an envelope, and when she opens it, she finds acceptance letters from 3 different universities, all offering her full scholarships to complete her teaching degree. Richard, what did you do? Sophia asks, but she's not angry, she's shocked. I didn't pull strings or buy your way in, Richard says quickly. I had my assistant help you apply to scholarship programs that you were already qualified for. Your grades, your portfolio, your volunteer work, it was all enough. You just needed someone to help navigate the application process. Sophia stares at the letters, and for the first time in 5 years, she sees a future that's bigger than just surviving day to day. She could go back to school. She could become the teacher she always dreamed of being. She could build a career instead of just working jobs. Why? She asks, and her voice is barely a whisper. Because you deserve every opportunity you never had, Richard says. Because you're brilliant and talented, and the world needs teachers like you would be. And because I want to give you something that isn't about money, it's about believing in who you are. Sophia starts crying, the good kind of crying this time. I don't know how to thank you for this. You don't have to thank me, Richard says. Just, let me be proud of you. Let me be your dad. And that's the moment everything changes between them. That's when Sophia stops seeing Richard as the stranger who turned her life upside down and starts seeing him as the father who's trying to make up for 20 lost years. That's when Richard stops walking on eggshells and starts acting like the parent he's always wanted to be. The next few months are like a crash course in becoming a family. They have their first real fight about something completely stupid. Sophia thinks Richard needs to eat more vegetables. Richard thinks Sophia works too many hours, and they both realize that being able to argue means they're comfortable with each other. They have their first holiday together, Thanksgiving, and it's awkward because neither of them knows what their traditions should be, but they figure it out together. Richard insists on cooking the turkey despite having never cooked anything larger than scrambled eggs, and Sophia makes her mother's stuffing recipe, and they both pretend not to cry when Richard says grace and includes Elena in his thanks. Richard starts attending Sophia's art shows, the small community center exhibitions where she displays her work. He's ridiculously proud, probably embarrassingly so, and he buys every piece she's willing to sell just so he can have her art hanging in his home. Sophia starts asking Richard about his business, not because she wants anything from it, but because she's genuinely interested in his work. She helps him with some marketing materials, bringing her artistic eye to his corporate world, and Richard discovers that his daughter has incredible instincts for visual communication. They take their first real trip together, just a weekend getaway to a small town with art galleries and antique shops. Nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, just two people spending time together and learning how to be comfortable in each other's company outside the familiar space of Richard's penthouse. And somewhere during that weekend, while they're browsing through a used bookstore and Richard is listening to Sophia explain why she loves a particular author, it hits him. He's not trying to be her father anymore. He just is her father. The relationship he thought he'd lost forever has somehow rebuilt itself into something even stronger than what they had when she was 3 years old. 6 months after Sophia moved in with Richard, she starts her final semester of college. She's studying education with a focus on art therapy, planning to work with kids who've been through trauma, kids like herself in some ways. Richard attends her graduation, and when they call Sophia's name, he cheers louder than any parent there. After the ceremony, they take pictures together, the first real family photos they've had since that picture from Navy Pier 23 years ago. But the most beautiful moment comes later that evening, when they're back at Richard's penthouse, which Sophia has gradually made feel like a home instead of a museum, and they're looking through the graduation photos on Richard's phone. I have something for you too, Sophia says, and she hands Richard a small wrapped package. Inside is a coffee mug, but not just any coffee mug. It's one Sophia made herself in a pottery class, glazed in blues and greens, with slightly imperfect edges that show it was handmade with love. And written on the side, in Sophia's careful lettering, are the words "World's Most Patient Dad." Richard stares at the mug for a long moment, running his fingers over the words, and when he looks up at Sophia, his eyes are full of tears. "Patient?" he asks, laughing and crying at the same time. "You waited 20 years to be my dad," Sophia says simply. "And then you waited for me to be ready to let you. That's pretty patient." That night, for the first time in 20 years, Richard goes to sleep without staring at that old photograph. He doesn't need to anymore, because his daughter isn't a memory from the past, she's his present and his future. 1 year after their reunion, Sophia has her own apartment again, not because she needs to get away from Richard, but because she's ready to be independent while staying connected. It's a beautiful place, nothing like the tiny studio where this all started, and she can afford it comfortably with her new job teaching art therapy at a children's hospital. Richard helped her find the apartment, but Sophia pays for it herself with money she earns from work she loves. The trust fund Richard set up for her is still there, but they've decided together to use it for something meaningful, a scholarship program for kids who've lost parents, giving them opportunities Sophia never had. They have dinner together twice a week, talk on the phone almost every day, and text each other terrible jokes and interesting articles. Richard has met Sophia's friends, the ones who stuck by her through the hard years, and they've cautiously decided he's good enough for their fierce, amazing friend. Sophia has started calling him Dad, not because she feels obligated to, but because that's who he's become to her. Not a replacement for the father she thought she never had, but the father she's gained, the one who loves her exactly as she is while believing she can become anything she wants to be. And Richard? Richard has finally learned the difference between providing for someone and being present for someone. He's learned that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts, it's about showing up consistently, listening carefully, and being willing to put someone else's needs before your own. The last scene of our story takes place on Sophia's 25th birthday. Richard has planned a small celebration, nothing overwhelming, just dinner at Sophia's favorite restaurant with a few close friends. But the real gift comes earlier in the day, when Richard knocks on her apartment door holding a small wrapped box. Inside is a locket, not an expensive, flashy piece of jewelry, but something simple and meaningful. When Sophia opens it, she finds two photos, one of her and Richard from her graduation day, both of them grinning at the camera, and one of Elena, young and beautiful and laughing. "So you can carry both of us with you," Richard explains. But Sophia has a surprise for him too. She hands him an envelope, and when he opens it, he finds a letter she's written, not a thank you note or a birthday card, but something deeper. The letter talks about forgiveness, not the kind you give because you're supposed to, but the kind you give because holding on to hurt takes too much energy that could be used for love instead. It talks about second chances and how some stories don't end the way you expect them to, but turn out better than you ever dreamed. Most importantly, it talks about family, not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose to build together, day by day, conversation by conversation, shared meal by shared meal. At the end of the letter, Sophia has written something that makes Richard cry happy tears. "Thank you for never giving up on finding me, and thank you for being exactly the father I needed, exactly when I was ready to let you." And that, my friends, is how a billionaire and his daughter found their way back to each other. Not through money or grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through patience, understanding, and the simple daily choice to keep showing up for each other. It's a story about second chances, about the power of unconditional love, and about how sometimes the family you find is even more precious than the family you lost. It's about learning that it's never too late to heal old wounds, never too late to build new relationships, and never too late to become the person you were always meant to be. Richard got his daughter back, but more than that, he learned how to be the father he always wanted to be. Sophia got the security and opportunities she'd always dreamed of, but more than that, she got the love and support she'd been missing her whole life. And Elena? I like to think that somewhere, somehow, she knows that the two people she loved most found their way back to each other, and that they're honoring her memory by building the family she always wanted them to be. That's the end of our story, but really, it's just the beginning of theirs. Because the best relationships aren't the ones that never face challenges, they're the ones that face challenges together and come out stronger on the other side. Richard and Sophia have the rest of their lives to be father and daughter, and something tells me they're going to make the most of every single day. Hey, love story enthusiasts! Agape Love Tales is where romance comes alive, with stories of passion, secrets, and second chances that'll keep you hooked. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of hopeless romantics. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss a twist in our tales of love. Tomorrow never ends, so our stories keeps coming endlessly. Drop your opinions about this heart-wrenching story in the comment and tell us about your second chance stories too. The world wants to listen.